Okay, go ahead. Your friends.
Yeah, some really good friends.
Their popular book is Men Are Like Waffles, Women Like Spaghetti. And it's been going on for years. It's really a bestseller. But they have a book called Red Hot Monogamy.
They don't get into like all the positions and all that stuff, but they give you other things.
The intimacy.
Yeah, the intimacy part of it.
And they live here in Thousand Oaks or Oxnard, but they travel all over speaking and stuff like that. They're on the speaking circuit.
Are they Christians?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
They do a lot of marriage
they were
conference.
pastors, but like she'll give you a lot of ideas, and you can Google Red Hot Monogamy, sex, and women are like waffles, men are like spaghetti, or does it go the other way?
It's the other way around.
Oh, okay.
Men are like waffles.
Yeah, but like I said, she doesn't get into all the tactical stuff, like you need to move here and do this and that, but she'll give you like intimacy stuff, like
Well,
and that's a start. I mean, you got to start with that.
Anyway, all of that to say, I think people appreciate real conversations, especially in the family of faith, because it seems so off limits. We did a class at our church once that our pastor and his wife did. They're our age, or I mean, I don't want to say we're young anymore, but they were younger when they did it. And the homework in the class was that you had to have sex 3 times a week. That was the homework for the couples, everybody in the class. And they talked about real things, like not just here's what the word says and blah, blah. It was like real things that real couples are dealing with, everything from like hangups to is this position okay? And it was just real. And you break down the doors for the couple to have the conversation if you're having the conversation at large. Anyway, I know we went way sideways.
Oh, you know who else would be good too is our really good friend Diane
Arnold. Yeah.
I don't know. She's she's retired. She's super busy, but
she's retired, but she's busy.
Yeah. She might do that too. But yeah, no, there's a whole
Bill and Pam would be a kick.
Yeah.
Guaranteed.
I've decided that what we need to do is we need to do an actual like a summit, like a sex summit, and to talk about monogamy. I really believe it, because the women were primed and ready. And of course, everybody said nice things, but I knew what I was expecting for the call. And it'd be great to talk about, what, like before you're married, when you're married, if you're divorced, actual things. That somebody asked about sexual dysfunction, and her answer was, it wasn't an answer. And I felt bad for the woman. I wanted to go there, but I didn't want to take over the call. It was her call. So anyway, there's a real need. So when we do it, I would love to, I don't know if you guys are wanting to do that, but I would love to have you guys do it.
Yeah. And we'll connect you to Pam.
Yeah. And she's also on, if you go to our website, isn't she on one of our, we did
we did talk about sex. Sort of. It was a Valentine's special.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's on we did a webinar that we talk about it, but I want to make sure it's what you're wanting. Like I said, she's more about intimacy than she is about
it's all included. It's all included.
I think we so need this in the Christian
community.
We so need it in the Christian community, because people just don't, I don't know what it is. We're Christians, so we don't talk about it. And I guess Christians aren't having sex and
God invented sex.
I was saying we were chatting, our corporate team, and I was saying to the girls, has she not read Song of Solomon? That's a dirty book. Anyway.
So you didn't know her ahead of time?
I did, but and I've seen some of her stuff. But it just didn't go there. It just didn't go there. It just was like the typical
Christian be good.
Go to the women's Bible study. Here, this is what intimacy is. And I was like, we all know that. Like, let's have a real conversation. The ones that matter. One of the women commented that she's in a sexless marriage. She didn't even comment on it. And that's a problem.
But you know that woman's crying out.
She's told me, and I'm like, anyway.
Well, so no, she is, and it's not like she's the only one that's like that. There's like tons of it.
Sure.
It's like everybody talks about it outside the church, and they talk about pornography and all that. But for some reason in the church, it's like we don't. And I'm like, pornography is running rampant as much in the church as outside the church. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but but we don't want to talk about it.
I think it's like I heard a statistic recently. It's like 1 in 3 in the church, within the church, 1 in 3. I don't know if that's accurate, but that's what somebody told me, but I haven't researched it. But anyway, all of that to say, there's nothing off limits. They're like, you guys can be real people talking about real things. I'm going to intro you. I'm going to talk about your book, and then we'll actually get started. I just recorded this just in case I wanted it for some reason.
That reminds me of our
Is that
client.
a real tattoo on your shoulder?
This is a real tattoo. It's my birthday.
It
matches your flowers.
It matches my blouse.
I was like, is that real, or did she
it
just
looks like I
it?
did it on purpose for the blouse, but it didn't.
We had a client. We were on the way. Seriously, we were on the way out the door. We were done with the session, leaving, and she's like, "I need to talk with you for a minute." And I'm like, she said to us, and we're like, "What?" Now we're business consultants, mind you.
Yeah.
And she says to us, "My husband won't have sex with me."
Was he there?
Yes. And it was like, I'm laughing, but it's not funny. But it was like, and I could totally see both sides of her. She was a high off the charts D, running everybody over, telling him what an awful person he is. He can't do anything right. And then I'm like, yeah, well, you wonder why he doesn't want to have sex, because, he's a horrible person, and
she's been emasculating him for probably a long time. That's a super turn on.
Exactly. When she's bashing you in front of his employees, the employees.
Oh yeah, she did it all.
All the things you're not supposed to do to build up your man, she did it.
Well,
I'm happy that you're here. Let me actually intro the podcast, and then we'll get started. Welcome back to the Girl Power Alliance podcast. Little do you know, but we've already had a whole podcast before we officially started this podcast. I have an absolutely remarkable couple that you're going to fall in love with. I'm in love with them. We could literally do like a series of 17 podcasts on a number of different subjects. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see their book behind them. I have it right next to me right here. If you're listening to this on one of the podcast channels, then we'll have a link to their website, their book, and everything in the show notes of the podcast. But I'm so excited to have Robert and his beautiful wife, Kaylee, on our podcast today. And let me just tell you something. Even if you're not married, the knowledge that this couple will pass on to you, even if it wasn't because of their story, the stories that they hear in their interactions with people every day, that what they do is they help couples to create greater work-life balance, especially couples that work together. And or if maybe one is an entrepreneur, is that part of I would venture to guess you have every which way but sideways. But welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks for having us. We're so excited to do this.
Yes, we feel honored.
I'm so happy to have you. And clearly we could, like I said, do a series of podcasts. But before we get into any nitty gritty, would you share with the people that are listening or watching a little bit of the backstory? So what you did separately and how you decided to do what you're doing together? Because I think that's always the story is very interesting.
Go ahead, Annie.
Well, I'm a third generation entrepreneur. And so I grew up almost not knowing anything different. And I remember when I met Robert, when we were dating, I said to him, I see you having your own business. And he's like, no, absolutely no. He was in a corporate. And I just thought, well, okay. I just thought everybody did. And, so we started dating. We met online, and we corresponding back and forth. It took me about 3 weeks to respond back, because he had emailed me on a Christian site, and I didn't join. I wasn't a member. He was, and so by the time I went on for the free days, I saw it. So then I responded back. He had a picture of him, a profile of the Matterhorn in the background skiing, and I love to ski, and I'm Swiss. I have family in Switzerland. So we decided we're going to meet up for our first date, and he asked me where I wanted to go, and I said I didn't care. And he's like, no, really, where do you want to go? Because I'm thinking in my mind, does he want to take me on a water date? Does he want to take me on a dinner? Like
swimming or drinking water?
No, drink a glass of water.
Hey, it says a lot about somebody where they want to take you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't want to set that stage. And so I kind of left it up to him. Even though he was traveling to my area, I left that all up to him. So we went out and had a good time. We were at the pier in Ventura, and then he walked me back to my car, and he said, I had a great time. Would you like to do this again? And I said, I had a great time too. And he's like, how about if we go out Wednesday? And I said, oh. And he's like, what? And then you explain your side of it.
Well, actually, before I said Wednesday, I just said, do you want to do this again? And she responded, okay. And so, a million things are going through my head in like a split second. Is she into me? Did she really mean yes? Or obviously she said okay, but her body language clearly was different. So I decided to just close the deal then. Yes or no? I wanted a yes or no because it's an hour back to Pasadena and I don't want to be driving home thinking, what the heck did she mean?
And most men would have just let me off the hook and thought, oh, she's too much trouble. I'm moving on. Forget it.
So that's why I asked her, okay, or told her I'm going to be back in town on Wednesday. So do you want to, go out for dinner again or grab a drink? And that's when she hemmed and hawed.
I wasn't sure because you know what? Something could come up better. I didn't want to commit. I mean, there could be a lot going on.
Yeah, the old washing your hair routine.
Yeah. So then he's like, no, I'm really going to be in town. He wasn't going to let me off the hook. So then I said, okay, let's go. So we went out on Wednesday.
Yeah. And then it gets
it doesn't
easier
get
and harder
any
at the same time.
for him after that either. Okay, you guys, I made him work.
But long story short, and if you want to ask deeper questions, but we ended up going to counseling a month after we had met. Or no, she asked me to go to counseling. She suggested I go to counseling. And so it turned into relationship counseling all the way to the time we got married 2 years later. So that was a whole thing in itself. And so that counseling piece just kind of lays a foundation to kind of what we do now, helping married entrepreneurs, because coming from my corporate background, I knew what good looked like as far as running a business. And 6 years ago, when I started going full time to help, do business consulting for privately held small business, one of the first things I noticed, and they would hire me for marketing help because that was my background. But the first thing I would notice as I looked into their business, look into the operations, look at their financials and all that, I would say, man, you guys are working way too hard. Like it was just, it's not a marketing issue. You've got some margin issue. You just have no time and money to do anything to really grow effectively. The only reason why you are growing, if you are growing, is just because you're putting more time in. Mm-hmm. And that's just robbing you from personal time. And statistically, they say about 71% of business owners are married. And so what happened was one client after another would start talking about their personal life. Mm. And as we were helping them with the business, but then they start talking about their personal life and started just noting a trend. One of the things about me in marketing, I love the research part. And so I was just like listening to this stuff going, oh, is this a thing? Now, granted, my dad was a pastor, her dad was a business owner, but we also faced as kids the lack of balance in our life. Mm-hmm. And that our dads are working so hard in the ministry or in business that the family often took a back seat. So, we just thought it was maybe a coincidence. It was our own experience, but clearly this is a trend. And so that's why about 4 years ago now, I just asked Kaylee, I said, I think there's something here going on. And I did some research. I don't see any programs out there that help entrepreneurs do it better, do it well at home and in business. Just like we had a discovery call last week with a potential new client, and they found us in Google and they said, yeah, there's nobody. They said they go to counseling, marriage counseling, and they go separately. They have their own counselors. And they said they help us, relationally with some communication and stuff, but they can't understand the business dynamic and the issues that we're dealing with and how to real time apply the relational communication stuff into what we're dealing with in business. And so that's our sweet spot, is we understand business, but we understand marriage. We understand the tension between the two. And how do you do that better? And so it's just kind of like from childhood experience all the way to personal experience and career experience to our own counseling experience and to kind of led us to what we do now.
Isn't it a beautiful story when you're where you're sitting now to see how God literally orchestrated every step from childhood to be doing what you're doing now, which I think is such a beautiful thing to share with other people. Just that, even if we never went anywhere else, which I'm going to, but that piece alone is it's profound, because I think we are trying to rush everything all the time. Like, I need to go here, I need to go there, but there are specific things that we have to actually go through to get there. You had to go through the things that individually you went through as children, then, young adults figuring out your way. You had to work in corporate America, and then marry a full-on entrepreneur who knows nothing else, and you who didn't. I mean, it's just looking like the 30,000-foot view is like, this was a progression that was leading right here. It's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And I will just say this, that Bobby and I did a little marriage summit recently. We called it the BAM Summit. We did 4 or 5 days. We talked about different topics, and the last day was talking about being married to an entrepreneur. It's literally a different subject. It's a different subject. It has its own set of, it's a whole different category of relationship management, for lack of another term. And it is, and we are both entrepreneurs, which is a blessing and a curse. It's been wonderful, and sometimes it's not wonderful. But I think to myself all the time, because I have worked with women for so many years who want to be entrepreneurs or are, and when they're married to somebody who isn't, that is a whole ball of wax to unwind. And some couples really, they actually don't make it. So I think what you're doing, I just want to say thank you for what you're doing, because there is a huge need. I know you guys are perfectly equipped for such a specific and beautiful thing. And you guys love Jesus, and you just have all that and a bag of chips. And so I just appreciate what you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, statistically, only 9% of the population are business owners. And then 70% of them are married. So which means it's roughly about 6.9% of the population are married and have a business of, they're either working together or not. So it is a specific niche and a specific issue that doesn't really get dealt with head on. There's not, as entrepreneurs, we feel lonely as it is.
Mm-hmm.
You do.
And then when you're married and you're dealing with this business and marriage tension, like, who do you go to? Like, who really understands?
And it's so true, because we've had this discussion just as a couple, like, when it comes to just on this TMI about me, but just on a personal level, like to make friends, to have girlfriends, or to have couple friends. I'm intolerant of couples that aren't entrepreneurs. They don't get us. They don't understand. It's a different language. They think we're nuts. The decisions we make, they look at us like cross-eyed, like, why would you do that? Or, because the life that we have built together over the last almost 20 years has been a life that avoids the bulk of things that the average people do. We don't go places on the weekend. We vacation Sunday through Thursday. We do the things when everybody else is doing the regular things. Everybody's going this way, left, and we're going right.
Yeah,
and
I love it.
So to hang out with, just to find this, find a couple that you both like. That's hard, by the way, just automatically. Then to find a couple that maybe hopefully shares your faith, so you have that in common. Okay, now you're making it a little harder. But then find a couple you both like, different personalities, whatever, shares your faith and is entrepreneurs. It's a unicorn. It's very, very difficult. And but I've tried, and we've both tried, and you have to almost settle. I say that very lovingly, but you have to almost
sounds like you're dating.
I know. But you have to almost settle for people. Like, you can't get all of those things, but there is a very specific, you're so right. There is a very specific set of problems you deal with, stress that is on you, leadership things that you deal with, that people that aren't in this world, they don't understand it. So to have you two, to be able to, you had your own experience, but now what happens, I know this from doing hair. I learned so many amazing things from my clients. I was like a walking encyclopedia, because every day people were, and I'm curious. So I ask all these questions. I was just learning things, and you guys are sure with all that your clients now, your toolbox is full.
Plus doing the podcast. I mean,
and
all the guests we meet, and having you on, and your husband. Oh my gosh, that was a treat.
I mean, I remember when I first proposed this idea to her a few years ago. I asked Kaylee, I said, hey, what do you think about doing a podcast? Since we're doing this thing for couples and business and stuff like that, there's no podcast out there really for this. So why don't we do a podcast? And she said, absolutely no. Yeah, which I already expected that answer. So
my marketing husband here knows me too well.
It didn't hurt my feelings, because I was already expecting it. And so I just said, okay, just think about it. Because I learned early on, even in our dating life, that you can't put her on the spot, and don't expect an answer right away. And you can't push her, right? And so I just planted the seed and let it go. And then about a month later, I said, I asked her, "Oh, what do you think about doing like a little 5-minute video for like Facebook, Instagram for our audience?" And she reluctantly said yes. And then it was a little rough in the beginning, but she kind of got into it a little bit, got used to it. And then 2 or 3 months later, then she came back to me and said, "Okay, let's do the podcast."
Yeah, I have to ease into it. And it was totally not something I wanted to do. I did not feel comfortable. Robert's like, honey, it's not like you're speaking in front of people. You're on a podcast. You're going to love it. It's totally different. And you were right.
And she's like you, she's very inquisitive. And so I said, this is the perfect vehicle for you because one, you always say how you want to meet some great business people.
Mm-hmm.
What better way to meet them than invite them on to be interviewed, right?
True.
And then you can ask as many questions as you want because that's what you're supposed to do.
And you're so natural. You guys are very natural together as a couple. Were you like this when you first started just consulting other couples?
No, we didn't start consulting with other couples in the beginning. It was just strictly business owner. I mean, for their business. But then it kind of, as we noticed that they start talking about their personal life and how that was getting challenging, then we became intentional about it about 4 years ago.
And so were you doing it together when it was business people in the beginning? Or have you always done the consulting together? Was it separate?
The actual face-to-face consulting, it was just me, but she would help me in the business.
Yeah.
But when it was the direct interaction with clients, especially when it's Zoom, it was just me. And then after we saw the whole marriage issue, then we said, okay, it's 2-on-2. Get you and your spouse and me and my spouse, and we're going to do this together. We're going to talk about it.
So was it natural in the beginning? Like, were you, because you're so natural together. You complement each other in great ways. You're different enough that you're not just saying the same thing. So when you first started, was there an adjustment to figure out how that worked?
Yeah, because I was always doing the consulting anyway, and Kaylee would kind of stay in the background a little bit.
Yeah, because I like to be behind the scenes, the quiet one, didn't have the voice, kind of hidden. And I would refer to Robert, but then the Lord told me I couldn't do that anymore. He told me I couldn't because my husband is good at so many things. So I'm like, oh, Robert can do it. He can do it. I'll just be back here. I don't need to be in the front. And then he's like, no, you cannot ride on your husband's coattails anymore. You need to come alongside of him. And I'm like, really, Lord? And he's like, yes. And I'm like, okay, Lord. So it's been a process for me. And then he was so used to doing things by himself, running the show. So it took some work for us to come together.
And I think the podcast helped too, because we're doing this almost simultaneously. We started, focusing on married entrepreneurs, and then we kind of launched the podcast, just shortly thereafter. And even just doing the podcast together was kind of similar. At first, it was me primarily asking questions or doing the talking, and then as Kaylee got more comfortable, then she would to interject. And so now it's, what you're seeing now is definitely flowing a lot better than it was 3 years ago. And just, time and just trying to find our way.
Yeah.
And even little cues, like when she wants to speak, then I just tell her tap, because otherwise I'll just keep talking. but and it takes her a little while to process. So we just came up with a little thing, like you guys have the superheroes, right? When you're doing podcasts. Yeah. Well, Kaylee and I would just tap each other on the thigh when we want to say something.
Well, that's funny because I tried the tapping, but Bobby didn't cue into it. He did not get it.
He just thought he was just giving like little taps, little low taps. Yeah.
He didn't feel it, see it, nothing. It had to be very visual, very visual. So yeah, that's really awesome. I have a question for you because I know in my experience, Bobby and I have almost only worked. We've been together 23 years. We've worked together for over 20 of them. Like literally, we've actually worked together. So that has been really such a positive, I mean, of course you fight and there's all the things, but I think because of that, we've been able to grow together, experience things together. We have shared memories. I think it's been a really, really, I can't imagine not working with him. So since you guys have been doing what you're doing now with couples and the podcast, do you think that your relationship has been strengthened? Tell me how that's changed.
I say it's been strengthened because one time we were getting on a coaching session with a group of people, and I don't know what it was, if it was fear on my end or what, but I got upset about something. And we were getting ready to get on the call in 5 minutes. And Robert's like, really, honey, are you doing this now? And we had to get it, I won't say we got it totally resolved, but we got it to a place where we could come back and talk about it later, because we're not the type of people that can get on when I'm upset and act all cheery like nothing's wrong. And that week we were working with the couples on conflict. So it's
Of
kind of
course.
interesting how that kind of pops
Yeah,
up.
it was our pilot group. It was our pilot group of married entrepreneurs, and yeah, she's like, she raises this issue, and I'm looking at her like, really? Like, so we had a real time, teaching moment to our group. Like,
Yeah.
we got on and said, this is what happened. This is how we dealt
Mm-hmm.
with it in 5 minutes. Because people think, oh, you gotta totally have it resolved, before we go to bed or whatever. And we said, look, in 5 minutes, you can't resolve the issue, right? By the time we get on the call. What we did do is I acknowledge the importance of this issue that we need to talk about, and let's talk about it. I heard a little bit for her and then said, okay, let's talk about it after the call. Give me like 15 minutes after we're done with our group, and then we'll talk about it. So that was the resolution, because just that piece, Kaylee having that piece, that knowing I hear you and we will talk about it, and this is when we're going to talk about it. Because a lot of times, like, a spouse will say, okay, we'll talk about it later. And later is just really code word for, I hope you'll forget. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that was kind of a teaching moment even for our group. And obviously it just keeps us sharp.
And so that's one way of building intimacy, is like, okay, we had conflict. Now we need to be able to resolve it. And when you resolve it, it's just speaking the truth in love is what conflict is. And that brings you closer to each other.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think sometimes what could feel like it's the biggest fight could turn into the biggest blessing, because you broke through something that was causing, whatever the thing was. And, I think that you tell me if this is true for you. It's been very, very true for me. I'm obviously, Bobby's not here, so I won't speak for him, but it's been very true for me, especially over the last couple of years, at teaching 16 weeks of leadership. It has forced me, not that I wasn't living that way, but it up levels you. It holds you at a very, very high accountability to yourself when you are speaking on these things. And it's changed me dramatically. I have literally changed as a person because of the things that I teach. And so I wonder, with you guys, I mean, you're talking about strategies within a marriage, strategies within a business, and you're doing this on the podcast with other people. You're doing it in real life for your own business and your own lives, and you're doing it with other couples. Do you see that has, like, you're holding yourselves to this standard of stuff that you're talking about, and you're basically the perfect couple now, right?
Yeah,
Not
sure,
the perfect
right.
couple. So, what we do
Keep on
is,
dreaming.
what we do is we have the tools to know how to deal with issues when they come up,
Right.
because they're going to come up. There's
Yeah.
because we're different, right? We have similarities, but we have differences, and there's going to be differences of opinions. That's just going to be natural. And that's also a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Right. That's one of the issues we tell our clients and remind ourselves is, don't let the issue become the problem between you and your spouse, because, the issue at hand is something we work together and deal with. And it's beneficial to have different viewpoints, because we all have blind spots. And I look at things one way, she looks at things the other way. And together, though, we get the full picture.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes in couples, it becomes an argument and a big conflict where you just got to understand, we just have a different way of looking at it. And so let's explore that before we just get into an argument.
It's actually a beautiful thing. I hated it about Bobby, though. I have to tell you, it was probably the source of my own irritation in our relationship the most for many, many years. Because I was like, I don't get why he doesn't see it my way.
What's wrong with him?
Clearly, I've got this right. I mean, obviously, I have it right. And but now here we are, over 2 decades in, and I so appreciate the fact that he doesn't see things like me. And now, if he does agree with me, I always think, he's not telling me the truth, because we usually think so differently. But I think, you grow and you change in different ways. So now these things that used to cause conflict, we don't have the same amount of them anymore, because we actually have molded to each other in such, really probably weird ways.
Yeah.
That's really
Well,
awesome.
and sometimes it's hard too, because, we want each other to be honest. And sometimes that's hard to hear. I say, oh, honey, I want you to be honest with me. And then when he says it, I'm like, oh, if I really want to hear that, I'm like, you hurt my feelings, but then I have to take it to the Lord and pray about it and think about it. Is what he's saying, there's some merit, some truth there, even though it hurts.
I think when you have, when you really trust that the person that you're with wants the best for you. And that just takes maturity in a relationship, because I know when I was in my 20s and for sure probably through my 30s, you're still kind of thinking about yourself a little bit. Do you know what I mean? Like you're
Mm-hmm.
thinking about what's best for you.
Mhm.
But when you believe for real, when you really believe that your person, they are for the best of you. They really are. They don't have ego. They're not competing with you. They want the best. And so I think for me, I know wholeheartedly, Bobby doesn't have any, he wants me to be the best that I can be. He wants that for me. So if he has something to say about me that's not great, I know it's coming from a place of, he probably actually doesn't really want to tell me because he doesn't want to hurt my feelings, but he does want me to be the best version of myself. And I think that takes a while to get. It took me a while. We were together 9 years before I don't know if I told you guys this when we recorded with your podcast, but I was married and divorced and kind of thought, I really didn't think people could be in love before I met Bobby. I thought everybody was lying, because I loved my children so much and I never loved anybody even close. It couldn't even come close to that depth that I felt for my children. So I was just like, well, everybody lies because nobody loves oh, they're my soulmate. And I was like, all right, there's no such thing as a soulmate. I'm sure you get along, but it's just not, it doesn't come close. Well, when I met Bobby, obviously my counterpart in every way. And I just fell head over heels in love with him. And even that being said, we were together 8 or 9 years into the relationship. And I had this thought, I think we might make it. 8 or 9
Oh, wow.
years
Oh, wow.
of just life and everything. It's not like we were fighting or anything, but I remember very clearly thinking this might actually last.
Mm.
And so I think that for me, that was like a piece of a wall that finally took 9 years for that piece to dissolve. But when you can do that and you can trust the other person that much, I think you can receive their feedback, even if it feels negative, with different ears.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's one thing Kaylee said years ago, and I still remember it because one thing I got to hand it to Kaylee. She's really, I think she's responsible for building me up as a leader and the head of the household. And she leads from behind, basically. She's still a leader. And I remember we had a disagreement on something I think had something to do with, finances or investing or something like that. And so we had a disagreement on this. And I was kind of digging my heels in a little bit. and then she just ended. She said her piece. And then she said, I trust you. I know you'll make the best decision for us. And then the moment that word us came out, I'm like, it just hit me right between the eyes. And I'm like, oh, so it's not about me, right? I really do need to look at this thing differently. Is this really the best decision for us? Because when we get in arguments, we want to everybody kind of finds a neutral corner and you want to dig your heels in, you want to be right. But when she said that, I was like, oh, that's right. It's not about me. And so I totally looked at it differently. And then probably about a week or so later, I remember coming back to her and said, I think you're right. That's just what it is. Because I have to think about it from different, her angle and my angle, and then come to the conclusion. I was like, yeah, what is the best decision for us? And then I'm like, oh, okay, I got it. So yeah, I think that was kind of a turning point for me too in our marriage, was that. It's like, oh, this isn't a zero-sum game, right?
Yeah.
We're really, everything we do is about us.
Yeah.
And so let's treat it as such.
That's awesome. What a beautiful and powerful moment. Just that one thing that she just said, because she was just feeling it and it hit you, and that's a transformative moment. I'm thank you for sharing that. I have a question for you guys. Have you ever worked with a couple that you were like, yeah, you guys, it's not going to work?
You mean the marriage or the business or both?
Both. Either or both. You guys are like, literally, it's not working.
Not necessarily, although we had a real apprehension early on. And it was kind of with the couple we were talking about off right before we recorded. But I mean, in their intake form, she must have filled this out because it said, oh, no, it wasn't the intake form. Is as we're signing the contract for them to accept us as a consultant, as literally as she's like signing it, she's like, this is our last ditch approach. And I'm like, wait, what do you mean? What do you mean exactly? Is just talking about your marriage or business or both? And so she's talking about their marriage. And I'm like, well, okay, number one, we're not marriage counselors.
Mm-hmm.
We are business consultants first. We just happen to help you, with some of the communication and conflict issues, but we're not miracle workers in a sense. We're not marriage counselors. And if that's where you feel you are in your marriage, then we're probably not the people. but they decided to go on, and we made some strides with them, and then, but we've never had going in, once you're kind of into it, we've never felt that it's not going to work. We always see, because of the way they come to us, because we want to work with them together. So which means they're both saying, okay, yes, there's something wrong here, and we both want it fixed. So I think for the fact that we only accept them together, we already know both sides have some skin in the game, and they want this to work.
That's
and
awesome.
So they usually come with a certain attitude. If only one person's going to work with us, then it's kind of, it can still work, but that's not ideal situation. And so far we've only, we've been able to work just with the couples together.
And then I remember your very first, we weren't working together, your very first client was in business for 40 years and they didn't make it. They were not teachable. They didn't want to do anything different. They said, oh, this is the way we've been doing this for 40 years. They've tried everything they said. And the ideas we had, they just were closed to it and not open. And then they ended up, unfortunately, closing because...
That was the business angle. It wasn't a married couple we were dealing with. It was just a business that we're helping. But
they needed you, and they didn't even know it.